I'm going to talk about vibrato, and one of the most important aspects to any guitar player's arsenal is to have good vibrato. There's a lot of pitfalls to it. If you don't pay attention to it, it could be sharp, could be out of tune, and that's not something we really want. So let's talk about the basic nuts and bolts of vibrato. First thing is, how do you do it? Generally, when I vibrato a note, I will have my hand over the top of the neck. And say if I want to vibrato this D note here on the 7th fret of the 3rd string, I'm going to play that note, I'm going to jam my 3rd finger up against the fret and my 2nd finger behind it, and my 1st finger is going to come down and flop over these other strings to help mute. I'm going to pull down in one direction. In this case, I'm pulling downwards. Some people might push upwards. I prefer to go down on a lot of notes, most of them actually. Obviously in the high string you can't, right? There I'll go up. But mostly, if I can, I'll pull downwards. I think I have more control that way. The key here is the vibrato is not coming from my fingers individually like this. It's coming from my forearm. I'm locking these fingers, and I'm pulling my arm down, my wrist down with my forearm. Right? So I'm allowing the string to pull the note back in tune, and I'm pulling it sharp. But the reason why I can get that control out of it is I'm using my forearm, not my fingers. My forearm is clearly much stronger than my fingers. And this is especially prevalent when you're bending and vibratoing. Okay, so my 2nd finger going to vibrato, I'm always going to reinforce that finger so I can get some more strength behind it. See, 1st finger? Now there's 2 ways I'll do the 1st finger vibrato, because I'm a big early Clapton fan. Kind of stole some of that from him where I pull the whole hand downward, like that. Or I'll just pivot on that joint right there. Now here I've done some pretty mellow vibrato, kind of medium. One thing you might want to notice that the vibrato is consistent in the interval that I'm bending up. You know, it's not even a half step, but I'm not going and changing the pitch of it or not keeping it steady. It's got to be steady. Right? It's always kind of a steady pitch. I can be faster. And that says something very different than... The thing I love about vibrato is it adds a vocal quality to your note. And that's really, I think, what we're going for. So a fast vibrato or a slow. Now what I did there for a second is I did a delayed vibrato, which I do a lot, and I think because I got it from singers. And then I start bringing in the vibrato. So note, wait, vibrato, and then you can speed it up. And here really good singers do that. People have real control over their instrument. Same thing with guitar players. So you hear me talk about practicing things with intent. My intent here is to work on my vibrato, get control over the note and over my hand strength. And it takes some time. You really got to work on each of those notes individually. Now, if I want to put on a little more gain, I can get a really big, wide, fast kind of rock and roll vibrato. So that's a great sound too. So it's a wide, fast vibrato. You hear Hendrix do that kind of stuff. Now an important thing is you see some guys vibrato, the whole neck's moving, but their hand isn't really moving. So you get a lot of... and nothing happens. So you got to make sure you're locking up, pulling that string down. Now, of course, there's vibrato with the bar, but let's just talk about finger vibrato for today. Okay, I'm going to do a delayed vibrato and go from smaller to wider and faster. Pretty cool, right? So it's like a singer could do. Real control over the note. All right, so now when you bend a note and vibrato it, an important thing to think about is I'm going to bend up a whole step, and I got to hold that bend and then release the note below the pitch. When we're vibratoing a note without bending it, we're going above the pitch. Now we're going to go below the pitch and back up to it. So you want to think about keeping that note in tune. I highly recommend practicing your bends and vibrato. Now in the next installment I'll be talking about bends. But for right now, it's focusing in on your vibrato and keeping it in tune. Super important, and a great way to distinguish yourself from other players, develop your own sound, your own style, and really just to become a much more interesting player. So I'm Jeff McErlane, this is Tighten Up Your Blues, and thanks for checking us out. Take care.